If you think the story of Israel and Gaza began with rockets on the evening news, think again, because this conflict is a century-long drama of empires collapsing, nations rising, neighbors clashing, and ordinary families trying to survive history as it unfolds around them. Long before modern headlines, the land between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River was part of the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived there under imperial rule. In the late 19th century, as nationalism reshaped Europe, a political movement known as Zionism emerged among Jews seeking a national homeland, driven by centuries of persecution and rising anti-Semitism. At the same time, Arab nationalism was growing across the Middle East as communities sought independence from Ottoman and later European control. Two national movements, both rooted in identity and history, began converging on the same small piece of land. World War I changed everything. The Ottoman Empire collapsed, and Britain took control of Palestine under a League of Nations mandate. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, expressing support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, while also stating that the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities should not be prejudiced. That ambiguous promise would echo for decades. Jewish immigration increased, particularly during the 1920s and 1930s, as Jews fled persecution in Europe. Tensions grew between Jewish and Arab communities, leading to periodic violence and unrest. Then came the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were murdered by Nazi Germany. In its aftermath, global sympathy for Jewish survivors intensified calls for a Jewish state. In 1947, the United Nations proposed partitioning Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab, with Jerusalem under international administration. Jewish leaders accepted the plan. Arab leaders rejected it, arguing it unfairly allocated land and ignored the wishes of the Arab majority. On May 14, 1948, Israel declared independence. The next day, neighboring Arab states invaded. The war that followed ended in 1949 with Israel controlling more territory than the UN plan had proposed. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians fled or were expelled during the conflict, an event Palestinians call the Nakba, or catastrophe. Many ended up in the Gaza Strip, a narrow coastal enclave that came under Egyptian administration. For Israelis, 1948 marked survival and sovereignty. For Palestinians, it marked displacement and statelessness. Two foundational memories equally powerful but profoundly different. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel captured the Gaza Strip from Egypt, along with the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Sinai Peninsula, and Golan Heights. Gaza became occupied territory. Over time, Israeli settlements were established in Gaza, while Palestinian refugee camps became densely populated urban areas. The conflict shifted from state-to-state warfare to an occupation that shaped daily life. In 1987, frustration boiled over into the First Intifada, a Palestinian uprising marked by protests, strikes, and clashes. Images of young Palestinians confronting Israeli soldiers spread worldwide, altering American perceptions and international discourse. The uprising pushed both sides toward negotiations. In the early 1990s, secret talks in Norway led to the Oslo Accords. For a moment, hope seemed possible. Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization recognized each other. The Palestinian Authority was created to govern parts of the West Bank and Gaza. The vision was a two-state solution, but trust was fragile. Extremists on both sides sought to derail the process.
Suicide bombing targetait d'Israélis civilians.
Israeli settlement expansion continued in the West Bank. In 1995, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who had signed the Oslo Accords, was assassinated by a Jewish extremist. Momentum stalled. In 2000, the Second Intifada erupted after failed negotiations and rising tensions. Violence intensified. Israeli cities experienced deadly attacks. Israeli forces launched large military operations. Gaza became a focal point. In 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew its settlers and military presence from Gaza, dismantling settlements and pulling troops out. Many in the United States saw this as a major turning point, proof that territorial compromise was possible. But what followed surprised many observers. In 2006, Hamas, an Islamist political and militant movement, won Palestinian legislative elections. The following year, after internal fighting with the rival Fatah faction, Hamas took full control of Gaza. Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade, citing security concerns and the threat of rocket fire. Hamas fired rockets into Israeli towns. Israel carried out airstrikes and military operations in Gaza. The enclave, only about 25 miles long and 7 miles wide at its widest point, became one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Over the next decade, several major escalations occurred in 2008 to 2009, 2012, 2014, 2021, each involving intense fighting, civilian casualties, and international scrutiny. Americans watching from afar saw familiar images: sirens in Israeli cities, Iron Dome interceptors streaking across the sky, apartment buildings collapsing in Gaza after airstrikes. Each round ended with fragile ceasefires, but not resolution. Meanwhile, life for civilians remained harsh. In Gaza, unemployment soared, infrastructure deteriorated, electricity shortages became common. In Israel, communities near Gaza lived under the constant threat of rocket fire. Both societies carried trauma. Children on both sides grew up knowing the sound of alarms or explosions. Political narratives hardened. Diplomacy faltered. The United States has played a central role throughout. Washington has been Israel's closest ally, providing military aid and diplomatic support, while also supporting efforts toward a negotiated two-state solution. American administrations, Democratic and Republican alike, have attempted mediation. The Camp David Summit in 2000, the Annapolis Conference in 2007, and later initiatives all sought breakthroughs, but deep mistrust and core disputes over borders, security, refugees, and Jerusalem remained unresolved. In October 2023, the conflict reached a shocking new level. Hamas launched a large-scale attack into southern Israel, killing civilians and taking hostages. It was one of the deadliest days in Israeli history. Israel responded with a massive military campaign in Gaza aimed at dismantling Hamas. The fighting led to significant destruction and heavy civilian casualties in Gaza, drawing intense international debate. For Americans, the events triggered questions about regional stability, U.S. foreign policy, humanitarian law, and the future of Middle East diplomacy. What makes the Israel-Gaza story so astonishing is not only its longevity but its layers. It is about competing national identities, but also about geopolitics. It is shaped by religion, yet driven by modern political movements. It involves global powers, yet unfolds in neighborhoods, schools, and marketplaces. At its core are people: Israeli families who fear for their children's safety, Palestinian families who fear losing their homes, soldiers, medics, teachers, shopkeepers, caught in cycles of retaliation. The land itself carries sacred meaning for billions worldwide, adding emotional intensity rarely matched elsewhere. For a U.S. audience, understanding this history means recognizing both narratives. It means seeing how 1917 connects to 1948, how 1967 shapes today's borders, how the collapse of peace talks 2 decades ago still reverberates. It means acknowledging that simple slogans rarely capture complex realities. Today, debates continue over what comes next: a renewed push for 2 states, a reimagined governance structure in Gaza, broader regional agreements involving Arab states, or prolonged instability. The outcome will influence not only Israelis and Palestinians, but also U.S. strategic interests, energy markets, global diplomacy, and counterterrorism efforts. The Israel-Gaza conflict is not a single war, but a century-long struggle shaped by memory, fear, aspiration, and identity. Its history is tragic, intricate, and deeply human. And while headlines often focus on explosions, the deeper story is about 2 peoples bound to the same land, still searching, after generations, for security, dignity, and a future that does not repeat the past.